Marlou and Miranda, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, leading behind the scenes. I'm loving this new channel for Paper Napkin Wisdom. Miranda, thank you for the inspiration for doing this. And Marlou, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today and work with you two amazing people. So thank you.
All right, so you shared a really interesting napkin with Miranda. Can you, I mean, I'd admire if you could get through it without laughing, but can you share it with the audience listening?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive right into it. It's change the world without being a smug twat.
All right.
I tried really hard not to laugh. And it feels like, it's catchy, but it's definitely a good capture of some of the things that, I've been thinking about leading up to this conversation. And I'm looking forward to diving a little bit more into it. But it's, I think it summarizes quite well what I want to talk about today.
So let's talk about that right off the top. Why did you choose that to be what you share with us today?
I think, just like in any sector, there are a lot of people who are doing things the things that they're doing because they want something out of it. And, whether that's publicity, whether that's money, whether that's whatever their driver is. For me, the most important thing for people to lead a successful life, and successful being defined as, happy, meaningful, is to find your purpose. And to find your purpose, and that is what gives meaning to the work that you're doing and the life that you're leading. So you're committed to a cause that's bigger than you. And I feel that a lot of people, even in the change-making sector and the social sector, a lot of people are in it for their own personal gain. And maybe that's not how they get introduced to the scene. But then when it comes down to it, there's still a lot of competition. People are fighting for that spot in the magazine. They're fighting to be on this incredible podcast. I mean, there's I think a definite link between the personality types that are driving organizations, that are driving change, with a desire to also share your personality and share your profile. And then you get into that fine line and balance between, how much of that is still because you stand for what you believe in, and how much of that is more superficial, talking about a subject and wanting to have the credits yourself and wanting to celebrate your successes yourself. And I think not in any sector, but especially when you're trying to change the world, we need to work together, and it's not about you or me or my face or your face. It's about collaboration. It's about joining efforts. It's about combining strengths. And unfortunately, I do see it a lot, but luckily there are a lot of people who understand that concept. And, I think especially in the sector and the work that I'm doing, I feel very lucky to work with a lot of people who don't necessarily share that need to be a smug twat. But yeah, I think, and that to me is just very important, and we need to have fun doing it. So yeah.
Think about that. How does that resonate with you?
Well, what comes to mind is how to avoid being smug when you are accomplished. And I look at the accomplishments that, you've had at World Merit and World Merit as an organization, and you've really done a lot of good and continue to do a lot of good. So how do you sort of inoculate yourself and the team and your leader from developing that ego that maybe comes from the successes you've had?
Yeah, well, there's we were actually talking about this over lunch today, that the work is never done when you're in change making. Mm-hmm. And making change is change making is a verb, and it's again finding that balance between celebrating small steps and successes and acknowledging that there is still a lot of work to be done, and feeling responsible for that change that needs to be done. And it's so easy, especially when you're working for an organization like World Merit or many of the other great organizations out there driving change, to forget about the small victories, because you're working towards something that has to be so much bigger than yourself and the work that you're doing, that it's really difficult to every now and then stop and reflect and celebrate the small steps. And you also don't want to get carried away the other way around, that you celebrate all the small steps because you don't keep an eye on the bigger vision. So what I'm really interested in, and really what we're trying to do with World Merit, is for example, we work with the Sustainable Development Goals as set out by the United Nations and its member states. They're so big, they're massive, but they are in no way meant to be paralyzing or overwhelming. But I think by the nature of trying to make change, you're addressing a group that would identify itself as a change maker or an activist. And to be completely honest, if I saw an advert on Facebook saying calling for all activists, I don't even know if I would resonate. Whereas my whole life is about activism and change making. So there's something about that word and that, you know, and there's a bit of stereotyping there as well. And I feel like even in my surrounding, and if I look at my friends and peers from university, I feel like sometimes they even see me as a hippie or being naive or you want to change the world. And I think that the real power in the work that we're doing is breaking these goals down to an individual level. What can you do as an individual to make change in your daily routines? And if we do that as a collective, that's when we make change. And then I don't care if anyone calls themselves a change maker or if anyone, you know, is on that front page of the magazine, as long as you feel and you not just feel, but, you know, it's something in you that is one of your values, that you recognize that you have a responsibility to do something on an individual level. That to me comes back to my napkin wisdom. Like, it's that you can change the world by doing small stuff, and you don't have to tackle one of the SDGs on your own. You can't. So we have to work together. You have to take responsibility on a personal level. And I think as long as you have that mindset, you can avoid getting that stamp of being a smug twat.
Are we going to make an actual stamp for that now?
Maybe we should.
I think we should. Marlou, you know what? I love this idea that you talked about small changes. I think, you know, really that's what Paper Napkin Wisdom was about. It's a small change that together we can change the world, right? Small changes make a big difference, and that's what we need to focus on, is the small change. And I want to ask you, and I love the like, if we go back in the words that you use, being a smug twat, I mean, part of being smug is the opposite of naivete, right? I mean, you said your friends sort of call you naive, but that's kind of exactly where you want to be, right? I mean, you kind of want to be innocent. You kind of want to be curious. You kind of want to be just like, oh, shucks, this is amazing. Let's what can we do with this, right? Isn't that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was just on the phone with one of my best friends last week, and she said she's thinking about this huge shift on in the HR department that she's working on, and she wants to drive the company towards a more inclusive company where there's room for people to grow and personal development. And she was like, you know, I work for a big corporate. How am I ever going to do that? And maybe in 10 years time, I realize how naive I am at this point. And I'm like, I would like to turn that around and say, you know, I think you are exactly as, like you said, as curious and driven and committed as you should be in this point. And it's people like you who can plant those seeds and start paving the way. And someone needs to be the first one to do it. And for me, the most important thing in terms of driving this type of stuff forward is maybe contrary to what we're currently seeing in some of the political climates, I feel like the world is still moving towards a more open and connected place. So we can fight it as hard as we want, but it's going to happen. And it needs to be more radically inclusive, and it needs to be more focused on merit and not on academic skills. And to create that more equal world, we need people to pave the way. And that's, you know, it's not a new concept that paving the way and being a pioneer is uncomfortable, right? You're out of your comfort zone. And I think it was Gandhi who at some point said, first they laugh at you, then they fight you, then they laugh with you, and then at some point you celebrate. Apologies for not knowing that quote by heart, but I mean, that's, you have to be out there.
Right?
Exactly.
First they laugh at you, then they mock you, then they respect you, and then you win.
Exactly. And it's not, that's not always easy. And I think as an entrepreneur yourself, like that's what you're constantly dealing with, being, you know, innovative and being on the forefront of that change. And yeah, I'm proud to be a change maker, and I think change making is quite cool. So how can we get people to understand that without the whole stigma of, you know, that there's some kind of like hippie, nothing wrong with being a hippie naivety. I don't know whether that word is correct, but that stigma around it, because don't we all want to be a change maker and do something positive for our community? So
I have a question for you then, Marla, with that, because I'm with you that it's so wonderful to celebrate these big lofty goals and visions, and you've got the UN Sustainable Development Goals on the wall right there behind you. At the same time, though, your title is Chief Operating Officer, and so people in roles like us, we're the ones who have to, the rubber hits the road, push things forward. So for you, how do you maintain that level of energy and curiousness when there's things that in the office that just have to get done? And you shared with me that you really help to keep, your founder and entrepreneur to have much more of a high level vision and not have to focus on practical things. And so that means the practical things have to trickle down to the staff while still maintaining that wonderful, curious energy and change maker attitude. How do you bridge that gap?
I think that's the reason why I love my job, to be honest. That's a really good question. I think from a vision perspective, I normally joke, or I have this quote where it says everyone has a superpower. Okay, and it's a combination of what you enjoy doing and what you're really good at. So you have to acknowledge the stuff that you can do and the skill sets that you have and what your talents are, but you also have to enjoy what you're doing. And if you don't enjoy what you're doing, there's no point in doing it. So in terms of getting back to your energy point, for me, it's really important to make sure that at the end of the day, I've worked on stuff that I enjoy doing and the stuff that needs to get done. And that can differ from day to day and week to week. But I feel like that's almost a personal responsibility for everyone in my team to make sure that you find the right balance. And we're all working on things that we don't like every now and then. But to me, that's the key to being energy resilient, that you make sure that you keep your energy levels up. In terms of filling that gap between the entrepreneur and the team, I think within our organization, the strength of World Merit and the reason why we are where we are today is because of the unstoppable dream and vision and that incredibly large, purpose, I guess, that our founder has. So in order for me or anyone who works alongside him to limit that is harmful to the organization, and it's harmful to the work that we're trying to do, and it's harmful to the people that we're trying to serve. So you're absolutely right. It's making that translation of picking the ideas and the things that are realistic and translating them into the team and making it something practical. And that means as long as there's a lot of trust between, in this case, the CEO and myself, or the founder and myself, is that he feels that there's enough freedom and room and space to share his ideas and bounce them off. And, he needs to constantly keep doing that. And the last thing I need to do is shut him down. But all I need to do is, be that sounding board and then reply with questions and say, okay, how are we going to do this? What would that look like? What's the workload? Who do you think can take that on? And how can we find that balance? And that means that some ideas are not realistic yet, and some are. And the ones that we are and that we mutually agree are a good thing to move forward are the ones that I then turn into a plan of action or for implementation with the team. And I've seen over the years with different people working alongside him that they're either one or the other himself. And I think what I'm really enjoying in my role at the moment is that I'm with him on his vision, and every time he comes up with a new idea, I'm excited and I can get behind it and I see it and I can envision it myself. But my brain instantly switches to how are we going to make this happen? And then I go away and make it happen. So I think it's also just the way I'm wired, but I still have the enthusiasm and the shared vision to have that conversation with him and to keep the energy levels high.
So I love what you're saying, and I like the interaction. And you're talking about it in a social space, and I think that's really interesting. But we just had something happen in our company around some software development that we're doing, and I've got this vision of where it's going to go and exactly how it's going to get there. And it was totally, the how it's going to get there was totally wrong, right? I mean, it was way off base. And I'm driving everybody crazy because I was involved in leading the how part and not just focused on the vision, but focused on how. And I was blowing everybody's brains out because I was just, I didn't see it. What was great about it is in our organization, the right person, Nigel, stepped in and said, hey, let me try to map this out. And I stepped back, he came in, he mapped it all out. And by the time he sent it to me, it was so obvious. It was like, oh my gosh, like I never would have gotten there. And that's what you're talking about, right? It's creating the space for someone to come in and having that dynamic, that relationship, Marlou, that you have with your founder. And I know, Miranda, you've had with a number of entrepreneurial leaders where you can come in and say, whoa, okay, got it. Let me work on this and come back with a plan. Is that what you guys are talking about?
Absolutely. And you get there by creating a level of trust. And that doesn't, from my perspective, we almost had that overnight. Like that was, we started off on a good path. I got a lot of responsibility, improved myself. So I feel like that was instantly we were working as a team. But it takes time, in most situations, it takes time to establish that trust. And then it's just about making sure people know that the door is open and that you're ready to have that conversation. But more importantly, you need to acknowledge and talk about what both your different skill sets are. And it's an uncomfortable conversation for you to have if that person would come in and say, I know you're not good at it, let me do it. Especially when you then go all defense or you're not sure about the other person's skills. And I think the more you work together and the more you find someone who complements that and that you can honestly have that conversation about differences in strengths, that's a really cool space to be in, because then it's so dynamic. And then the challenge will always remain. I mean, don't get me wrong, working with an entrepreneur is completely different than in any other normal setting. Okay, it's still the challenge of not overwhelming the team, making sure you get
not easy to work with
your ideas.
Are you saying that we're not easy to work with, Marlou? I'm sorry.
I love working with entrepreneurs, and if it was easy, it was boring. No, but it's that level of making sure you get people to join you on your path and on your journey. And I feel like, and I'm completely stereotyping now, but I feel like when you're so committed to your vision, like you said, you had it all figured out, it's that step in between that you often don't even think about, but most importantly, don't necessarily want to spend your time on in sitting people down, taking them through your idea step by step, making sure they completely understand. But it's such a crucial point for the team to work with you, because it's not just me, it's a whole team, and they need to understand that they've been working on a project for 3 weeks in a certain direction, and you want them to completely shift the way they're working or the direction in which they're working. And luckily we have a team who is very committed in doing so and very flexible, but only if they're treated the way they deserve to be treated, okay? And we need to acknowledge the work that they've already put in, and we need to acknowledge that it's going to be uncomfortable, and we need to support that and encourage that. And most importantly, we need to make sure they are as motivated and excited to work towards that vision, that shifted in direction, as we are, because otherwise you even have a very high turnover in your company, or you're going to completely burn people out. And especially in the social sector, I think that's a risk we cannot afford to take, because these people are sacrificing a much more secure life with probably much better wages than what they're doing currently, and simply because they're doing work that they believe in, that's benefiting the world. So we want to protect them and obviously make sure they feel like their choices are worthwhile, and that they are proud of the brand that they're working for.
Marlou, when you and I spoke, you used a term that I really liked and wrote down, being energy resilient. And you shared a little bit of a story of a time where you were on this major high and then things kind of crashed out. Could you share a little bit of that again?
Yeah, no, it's perfectly aligned with the stuff that we just spoke about as well. I think as in any startup, but any project that you would take on yourself as well, it goes with its ups and downs. And I think what we've experienced now, we were officially founded in the summer of 2013, which is 4 years ago. And in those 4 years, we've had many ups and downs. And you take 8 steps forwards and 7 steps back, and then 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And the most important thing is that you keep moving forward. And that goes back to celebrating small successes. But it doesn't mean that it's easy, and then it doesn't mean that it gets easier. And even maybe the opposite, people have been with us for that full period, or for a longer period of time. Managing that energy and knowing that what you're putting in is worth it is challenging. And to go back to the example that I mentioned to you, Miranda, we ran a program where we brought 360 young people from over 85 different 85 different countries together for 2 weeks in the United States, and a beautiful summer camp, Indian Head Camp. We spent there for 10 days, then went to New York and spent a full day at the United Nations headquarters, where each SDG group could present their project idea to a room full of incredible people. And, you know, while we were in the midst of that program, you know, you look around and you think, wow, we finally made it happen. And we brought all these people together. And, you know, World Merit is an online platform connecting all these people. But now we had 360 of them in one room, and a lot of people that we've been working with for years. And we're all doing this incredible stuff, and we're all like-minded. And then you spend your whole day at the UN. You have a big team. You had summer interns, and you think, you know, what can go wrong? And a couple of weeks later, you're back in the office. Obviously, the extra support that was there over the summer left. You realize that by doing a flagship program for the first time, there are risks involved, there are financial risks involved. You suffer the consequences. And, you know, at some point, you're back in the office with 8 people, and you look around and you think, how is this possible? And why aren't people seeing it? You know, and we know that we make sense, and we know we make an impact, and we know we're doing this incredible work, and we know that people see it and recognize it. But how come that we're, you know, again in this position? And for me, the moment when I realized that I was too focused on getting through that stage and forgetting about the things why I love being in this place is when I felt like my energy got into that position that we just talked about. It just felt like I was doing a lot of things that drained my energy, and you have some sleepless nights, and you go through that as an individual and as a team. And I just realized at some point I really need to honestly and without judgment look at myself and how I was feeling and where I was, and what changes I could make in my daily life to get my energy levels back up. Because to go through that first setback, you know, it's part of the game, and you're still full of energy, and you believe in what you're doing. And for the second time, it becomes a little bit harder for it to. But at some point, it's really about, you need to be very high in your energy to cope with that. And if you don't have that energy, then you won't get it through by going through that phase. So for me, the solution was to create a list of everything that was on my plate. And I divided them in 2 columns, and one was stuff that I like and stuff that I don't like. And every day I just made sure I picked things from both lists, you know, and it's a very practical, easy tool that I only needed for a couple of weeks, just to be more conscious about the decisions that I make on a daily level, in my daily routine, just so that at the end of the day, if I go home, I know that I'm at least neutral, but hopefully I have more energy than when I started the day. And that was why I chose this role and this profession and this organization. And that's what I really wanted to protect. So, and with me, the team as well, recognizing that they're going ups and downs, and they're with me on that journey. So
powerful, Marlou. I mean, and I like your comment that you had to pick things from both lists. It wasn't just the fun list. It was the both lists. I also, you know, for listeners, Marlou, you've talked a lot about social entrepreneurship, but you know, there's that sacrifice of security that all leaders behind the scenes are making, all team members are making when they're going to a startup, when they're going to a small business versus the big corporate environment. So it's not just in social. That's something that applies everywhere. But I want to leave the listeners with this last thought, and I think you said this really quickly, and I want to go back to it, this notion of trust, because you said it was overnight. Like it was this overnight idea of trust, this feeling of trust, and that was what opened the door to everything else. It was just like instantly working as a team. Miranda, you've said similar things to me in the past. And then, but you couch what you said, Marlou, by saying, you know, normally we have to build a lot of time and trust. But it feels like every single time that I'm talking to one of you great leaders behind the scenes, you have that instant feeling. It's a gut feel. Is that right? Am I missing something here? It feels like a pattern.
I mean, for me, it's when you can recognize that you're both doing something for the same reason, and you know, you're in it for the right reason together, and you're advancing a cause, something you both care about, whether it's that cause is an actual business, or a social enterprise, or in some of my cases, like an event or a program. And you can have this open dialogue, and you can challenge each other in a respectful way, because you both have that trust that all you're trying to do, the only dog in the fight, as we say in the South, is that you want it to be the very best possible thing it can be.
Yeah, and I can only say to that, I'm a very intuitive person. So I know, I've read a lot of books and articles about establishing trust, and, that there are many exercises and things you can do to create and enhance and improve that. But I resonate with what you just said, Govind. For me, it's very much my intuition, and it's more than just listening to it. It's also accepting that it's a valid argument. So it's not just hearing your intuition and listening to it, but then it's also acting upon it. And for me, it was really, of course, it was a big risk to get involved in this organization and to work with the founder. I moved countries to do that. So it's, of course you're taking a risk, but you can never make a wrong decision if something feels that right. And I think then if you go back to what Miranda was saying as well, if you have that trust and then you have that common purpose, I feel like those two things are really the foundation of what makes a successful team and a successful organization. And if you have that, you can do incredible things. So,
thank you for joining us, Miranda. Again, thanks for co-hosting with me today.
Thank you.
Love this conversation. And Miranda, I think you joined me in this. Marlou, we'd love to have you back and continue this conversation.
Wow, thank you so much. And I really enjoyed this. And to be honest, going back to my napkin wisdom, I just want to say it out loud one more time. Change the world without being a smug twat. I must say it does feel awkward for me to be at the end of this conversation and realizing I talked mostly about myself and my experiences, and not necessarily about the incredible work we're doing in our amazing team and community. But maybe that's something I need to get used to as well, that sometimes, to pay it forward, it's okay to share some of your own personal stories and journey. And thank you for offering me a platform for doing that.
And I think for me, the lesson I'd put forward to entrepreneurs listening, the time to really watch out for your team, I think, is, like Marlou described, right after a big win or a big high that might be overlooked, because you can have this incredible thing, whether it's, an event or an experience or a big win in the office, whatever it is. And as an entrepreneur, I think you feel that momentum and you're still going. And then there's that moment where your team's back in the office and life's kind of gone back to normal. And it's just such a letdown. And I think being aware of that and being able to share some of your own energy and infuse that back into the team, even after a huge high, is a really, really important thing that we need from you as a leader.
Especially because we're all experiencing that black hole, and including the entrepreneur, including the person behind and everyone around it. So it's you can celebrate and work through that together. And I guess that goes back to the point about collaboration and not being a smug twat. There's nothing better than experiencing that together and working your way through that with the people who understand what you're going through. So use your team and the people that you celebrate that success with to get back in your game and do even more incredible things moving forward.
Brilliant. Thanks, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.